Welcome to the Bag Maker's Workroom. I'm Chris with Simply Classic. Today is Thursday, February 13th, 2025. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. From what I understand, there was a lot of snow out there. We had a class, of course, our bandit class for February is going on. We had a Zoom last night, and quite a few of my students got some snow. So hopefully you're staying warm and safe, and you have a nice hot cup of tea or coffee or whatever your beverage of choice is, and you're sitting and relaxing and watching the Bag Maker's Workroom. So we want to say hello to a few people. We see Robin's watching, and of course we have Leslie watching from Tennessee. Hi, Leslie. And tonight is all about quilted bags. So we are going to talk specifically about quilting leather and faux leather. But before we get into that, we just want to remind you that we are live every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We appreciate you joining us, but if you cannot watch, then we invite you to watch the recording on YouTube at any time if you can't join us live. Make sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon to be notified of future videos and live streams. And of course, the best part of live streams is interacting with all of you. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box. And as time permits towards the end, I will definitely be answering your questions. So we're going to take a few minutes to talk about the Simply Classic Scoop. And we, of course, have some fun events that we are planning. And the first is in just a couple of short weeks, I will be in Chattanooga. And so on Friday, February 28th, I'll be teaching the Simply Classic Clutch. And then on Saturday, March 1st, we'll be teaching the Bertram. And the Bertram will be in this brown and black triangle pattern, and there's also a choice for a black and white triangle pattern. You can take both classes in the same weekend, and we highly recommend you do that. This is a lot of fun whenever I go up to Chattanooga. They recently bought a new building, so I'm really excited to see their new sewing space, their new building, and we hope that you can join us for the weekend. I think there's still a couple of seats left, so hopefully you can make it. And then, of course, in September 12th through 14th, we will be at the Sacramento Bag and Sew Expo. So Expo tickets are on sale and classes are on sale as well. And I have added an extra class. So unfortunately, one of the teachers had to drop out, and I offered to teach another class, which they obviously accepted. On Friday, I'll be teaching the Julie, and I think that class is just about sold out. Saturday morning is the Simply Classic Clutch. And then Saturday afternoon, I'll be teaching the Addie. And the Addie is not a Simply Classic pattern. It's actually a pattern by Purse Crafters. Looks like a really cool bag. It is a crossbody with a double flap. And so I'm not sure if that's actually up on the website yet, but if it's not, it'll be up soon. So watch for that. And then on Sunday, I'll be teaching the Sorella. And I think the Sorella is pretty close to being sold out as well. So if you can register for classes, I suggest you go ahead and do that on the website now. You'll pay the expo for the class, and the classes are $60 each. And then you'll be receiving an email from us about your class kits. Except for the Addie, you're actually going to be receiving an email from Purse Crafters. And basically what you're doing is paying the teachers directly for the actual class kits. Okay. So again, tickets are selling fast. Make sure you can get in while you can. And just a little hint, we are planning something in Florida. It probably be the end of October. So if you are over here on the East Coast, know that we haven't forgot about you. We are planning something. It's going to be amazing. It's actually going to be a retreat. So anyway, we'll tell you about that as soon as we have things finalized. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our featured products. And we always have featured products that we show you every week. And since we're talking about quilted bags, we're going to go ahead and talk about our quilted bag, which is the Simply Classic Clutch Kit. So we're going to go to the overhead, and I'm going to show you what the Simply Classic Clutch looks like. I've got a bunch of stuff here. Let me kind of move it out of the way. The kit comes with, this is Italian leather, it's lambskin leather. So the kit comes with the leather. It comes with the hardware, which basically includes the zipper pull. And it also comes with the lining. So if you are interested in trying leather, maybe you're not sure if your machine can handle it, or maybe you just don't want to take on a big project for your first bag, we really recommend these Simply Classic clutch kits. They're really a great way to build your confidence with leather. Super easy. Again, this is something that I'll be teaching both in Chattanooga and in Sacramento, and it's just a really great way to get your feet wet with it. And then our other featured product, and we're going to show you some of this actually quilted this week, but we want to feature our Cotton Candy Tex 45 thread. Now, this is a variegated thread, and it's really amazing. It looks very green here, but in reality, it's not that green. And we're going to show you on several different colors of bags. We did a lot of testing this week with this thread, so we'll show you that in just a minute. So as we move on, we're going to talk about our perfect pairings. And for perfect pairings, we're going to focus on our thread. Okay, so we definitely want to focus on this cotton candy thread. And we usually try to show you one leather and one faux leather pairing. Now, in both instances, we're going to tell you that this lining here is what we suggest. It is called Tiny Dots Khaki, and it is by Tilda. I'm going to try to bring it up to the camera for you. You can see there's actually little dots on here. It's monochromatic. It's really beautiful, and it's just going to give your lining a little something extra. So for our leather pairing, we suggest this beautiful emerald. Okay. Now I'm going to show you a real quick preview of what it looks like on emerald. And again, we did a lot of testing on this, and you can see that this thread has a lot of different colors in it. It's got yellow, it's got blue, green, and pink are the main colors, and it really looks well with this emerald. So that's what we suggest for the leather. For the faux leather pairing, we suggest magenta. Now, of course, tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so we definitely wanted to try to sneak some kind of pink or red or something in, and this magenta was really perfect. We really tested this out on a lot of different colors, and we found that the kind of darker colors seem to do a little bit better with this thread, and the magenta is really beautiful with it. Okay, so that is what we suggest for our perfect pairings this week. We think any bag that you make with the pairings will be absolutely gorgeous. All right. So we're going to talk about sharpening your skills. And kind of like last week, we're going to show you a little bit of inspiration before we actually do our demonstration. Okay. So we, of course, want this segment on quilting on leather and faux leather. So we're going to talk about that. And let's go ahead and talk first about what quilting is. So I know a lot of you are quilters, and you're also bag makers. And so this is really a great way to kind of marry the two. Get some faux leather, get some leather, make a quilted bag. And it's a great way to take your artistry and really make it your own. So when we use the word quilters, okay, usually we're talking about people who make quilts. But actually quilting in quilters, it's actually the process of stitching together layers of fabric to create a padded surface, okay? And a little fun fact, the word quilt comes from the Latin word colchita, which means cushion, okay? So let's go ahead and look at a little inspiration. Quilted bags, as we know them, were made popular by Coco Chanel in the 1950s. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later in the episode. But for right now, let's look at some of the more common quilting patterns that we see. And you see this diamond pattern. So the diamond pattern is really considered to be the most classic quilted pattern, because that's basically what Chanel used on their very first quilted bag in 1955. And we can see that here. Chevron quilting is another common style, and it was also popularized by Chanel. It's still very sophisticated. I really like this, but it's considered to be a little bit more modern than classic. But again, it's just really a beautiful, beautiful quilting. So let's talk about straight lines. I mean, straight lines are super easy to do, right? Pretty much we all can sew a straight line. And it's very versatile because it can be horizontal, or it can be vertical, or it can be both. And the stitching can be placed far apart or really close together. And it'll give you a different effect. So as you can see here on this bag, it almost looks like it's corduroy at first glance, but really it's quilted. And this is a Chanel bag as well. So we are going to look here at the Cannage. So let's take, and we're going to look at this next slide. And Cannage is a Dior signature quilting pattern. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, if you remember, and it's where we learned that it was inspired by a set of woven chairs that Christian Dior used. And this is also the quilting pattern that we use on the Simply Classic clutch, but it's called Cannage. So, of course, there are a ton of different quilting patterns that you can use and do, and really your imagination is the limit. We can't go over all of them today, but we're going to show you a few more that might kind of inspire you. So if we look at these clockwise from the top left, that very top one is a Donna Karan, and it looks like crocodile, but it's really a solid that they quilted a crocodile pattern on. So it's a different take on crocodile, obviously. The center one is absolutely gorgeous. It is a Vince Camuto, and it's a basket weave, and I just think that this is amazing. I just love that bag. It's just absolutely gorgeous. The one on the right, the blue one, is a Rebecca Minkoff, and it's an interlocking chain. The one right below it, the kind of cream one, is a floral, and it's a Michael Kors bag, and it's really beautiful as well. And then the Miu Miu is the one pink one. It is a matelassé motif, and matelassé comes from the French word for quilting. So these are all very beautiful. So here's a few more. We have the top left is a Michael Kors bag, and it's a little hard to tell, but if you look really closely, you can see the flap is a floral quilted design, and then the main part of the bag, you kind of see it peeking out there underneath the flap, is straight line stitching. The Vince Camuto in the middle is kind of a leaf design, and again, absolutely gorgeous. They do really intricate kind of quilting on their bags. The red one, top right, is a Michael Kors, and you can see it's kind of a wavy pattern. We actually have a faux that kind of does this wave. It's not quilted, but it has that wave look. The one down below it, this one's really interesting. This is a Dolce & Gabbana, and it's a starburst. And I really like that they used hardware as the center of the starburst. And then it's really just a couple of straight lines, right, for the starburst. There's not a ton of quilting on there. It's very subtle. But I really think that if you used a concho, like maybe one of our conchos we featured last week, put it on a diamond, the scroll concho, and then quilt it around it, I think that would be really beautiful. And then on the left-hand side, the orange one is Prada, and it's got triangles on it. So next we're going to show you some really simple ways that you can customize a bag with quilting. So first off is you don't need to quilt the whole bag. So don't think that if you have this big bag, you got to quilt the whole thing and it's a big undertaking. You don't need to do that at all. So you can see here this red bag just has a quilted panel in the middle, and it is the kind of classic diamond pattern. But the rest of it's not quilted. And that's a really great way to kind of almost create your own fabric with the quilting. And then the Tory Burch bag on the right-hand side has got quilting on the main body, but the flap is not quilted. So that's really interesting too. Another option is you can use color blocking or accent colors on quilted bags. So you can see here this Michael Kors has got a kind of a light blue and a dark blue. Same quilting pattern on both. And then this Coach, I thought was really interesting, these colors they used. So it kind of looks like a light purple or pinkish purple with a darker purple and then a camel color. So, use what you have and get inspired by these. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, you could almost do a patchwork style, like the bags here. So the cake bag on the right is really interesting because it has different textures. There's snake, there's some solid, there's some suede in there. And then, of course, the Tory Burch bag on the left kind of has the same idea, but the flat, they matched up the lines, obviously from the flat to the bag, and then use different colors there. I think a really great way to do this and maybe make it a little, maybe a little classy, a little more subtle would be to do like a suede and a solid, and then do these kind of maybe lines or like sew the pieces together and kind of make a bag from that, or maybe the solid and the textured or something. I just think it would be really subtle and it would be really pretty. So another way to jazz up your quilted bags is by using a contrasting thread color. So this white bag with black stitching is from Kurt Geiger, and it has their signature quilted pattern on there. I think that is absolutely gorgeous. I think to just take first of all, black and white is like the most classy you can get. And this is almost looks like it's 3D, and it almost looks like there is a woven pattern on there, but the reality is it's just quilting. And then, of course, on the right, we have this really beautiful blue bag, and it's got a kind of camel color classic diamond design by Chanel. But if you notice, the sides and the top are not quilted, so it's not really overwhelming the bag because it is a larger bag. So the final two ways that I want to kind of give you a thought process on here that you can embellish is by adding things to your bags. And this is something we don't see very often, but this Louis Vuitton bag on the left is actually a lighter brown. And then what they did is they put darker brown leather strips on top to create this diamond pattern and quilted the leather strips onto the bag. So I thought that was really cool. That's something I might have to try. I think that's really neat. And then the Valentino bag on the right-hand side is, of course, the classic Chanel diamond pattern. And it's got rivets, but not all over. It's only on the bottom and the sides. And I think that's really, it's nice because it's not overwhelming. But make sure if you do something like this, you don't put those rivets or Chicago screws right on the point of the diamond. You don't want to cut through your stitch line because it'll just come out. So just make sure you put them right above or right below. Okay, so I really hope that these bags gave you some different ideas on how to quilt on leather. And you may notice that some of these are a little puffier than others. And I'm going to kind of show you how you get the puffiness in one way or another. Like basically, the layers of foam and the layers you put behind are how you get the puffiness. Okay. So again, when we're quilting on bags, quilting is taking different layers and stacking them and then sewing through them. That's essentially the whole idea behind quilting. That's what quilting means. So we're going to show you some quilting on leather and on faux leather, and we're going to use our Simply Classic clutch as an example. And we're going to show you different layers of fleece and batting. Typically what I'll do is I'll put the main fabric, so let's just say a faux leather, and then I will take and put a layer of batting and then a layer of foam and quilt through that. Now, if I want it really puffy, I might put 2 layers of foam. So we've got certainly different ways to do that. We're going to show you some examples right now. We're going to switch to the overhead, and I'm going to show you that on this bag here, on this panel here, I have one. This is actually leather. I did this on my domestic Burnett machine, and I used 1 layer of batting, and then I used a layer of, this is just anti-soft and stable. Okay, it doesn't have to be anything like super expensive or super I mean, there's no technical, you can do this any way you want, okay? And this batting is something I had, so I thought I'd give it a try. And it really, you know, it came out well. If you look at this here, this is faux leather. And what I did here was I used a layer of fleece, and then I used 2 layers of batting, okay? Instead of 1, excuse me, a layer of batting, and I used 2 layers of foam instead of 1. You can see them here. So if you put these side by side, you should be able to see, hopefully, I know it's kind of hard to see on camera, this is a lot puffier than this one, okay? It's got a lot more dimension to it, and you can almost see when I push on that, how that kind of stays a little longer than this one here. Maybe you can tell by the light, but it's definitely got more to it. It's got more thickness to it. It's got more softness to it, and it's really, really pretty. I like the 2 layers better. Now, a lot of times when you actually use leather, you want to use, or what I use, is a product called Oslo, and it is a foam. It's a memory foam. Okay, so you can see here it's black. And when I push on it, you're going to see that that is a memory foam, kind of like what you have in your slippers. Okay, it actually imprints, keeps the imprint of your finger or whatever it is that you are pushing into it. So on this, in this case, I did this on my industrial machine. So I just used a camel color on this emerald, and I used 1 layer of batting and 1 layer of this memory foam. And this is what I got. Now let's take a look at 2 layers. This is a layer. Now I think that the batting here really kind of softens the stitches. I always like to put a layer in between of batting. And then this is 2 layers of memory foam. And hopefully you can see here, you can even see by the color how much puffier this bag is, or this panel here, okay? It's really puffy, where this one doesn't hold as long, but this one does. It's really preferable when you pick it up. This is really a nice memory foam to use. It's got a little more weight to it, and it's just, it really gives a high-end look. I love it. And granted, it's on the inside. You don't see it, but you can feel the difference, and you can see the difference in the actual puffiness of the bag. And I know that's a real technical word, but that's the word we're using tonight. Okay? All right. So what we're going to do is next talk about how to get this Cannage look that we have on the Simply Classic Clutch. And so we're going to go back to the overhead, and I'm going to show you first. Well, first of all, let's talk about what we need for it. So typically you're going to need a leather needle, of course, and depending on what machine you use, if you're using an industrial machine, you're going to probably want a size 18 needle with a Tech 70 thread. If you're using a domestic machine, you're going to probably use a number maybe 14 needle with a Tex 45 thread. And walking foot is optional, but I do recommend it because you're doing straight lines, and you want to make sure that that fabric is grabbed together with the upper and the lower foot evenly, and that it's not pushing your fabric. Make sure you also use a Teflon foot if you're using a domestic machine. That's really going to help. You're going to need a quilting ruler. I like to use, even on the leather, just a little bit of this 505 temporary adhesive. You can find this pretty much at every quilting store that you enter. Okay, it's very popular. And then I always use like cardboard or something on my table when I spray that 505 so I don't get spray everywhere. You're going to need some kind of pen. I, of course, recommend the silver marking pen. And, of course, you know, the thread. So we're going to go over to the overhead and talk about this for just a minute. And before we do, let me do one thing. I do want to show you this pattern here. This is a little Leah that I had done, and it is made out of leather. Okay, so this is some of the lambskin leather, and it is the diamond pattern, but I did it just slightly different. First thing is I didn't do it on a 45-degree angle. I did it on a 60-degree angle. So it made the angle a little more straight up and down than, you know, curved as much. So I'm going to, well, let's say curved, slanted, let's say. So when you take, and I'm sorry for the glare, I know that this ruler is glary, but what I did essentially was took my 60-degree line, which is on here, placed it on the top, and then drew the lines. Whereas the 45-degree angle, you can see that how that ruler is actually moving. and your lines would be different, okay? Now on this bag, what I did is instead of doing even lines, I did a 1/2 inch and then I did a 2 inch, then 1/2 inch, 2 inch. And so the quilting pattern, even though it's a classic diamond design, it's kind of a different twist on it. Okay, so again, your imagination is the limit when you come to this. So the first thing I would do is I'm going to take I'm going to use a piece of faux leather here. I went ahead and used some 505 spray, put a layer of batting and put a layer of foam. And for this demonstration, I was just using the anti-soft and stable. Okay, got that on. All right. Then from here, and I'm going to zoom in just a bit so that you can see. I actually already drew the lines, which are really hard to see. So we're going to draw them again. And I'm going to use an ink pen. Now, sometimes, and this is a perfect case of this, the quilting pattern is not centered on your pattern piece. And this is, again, a perfect example because on the Simply Classic clutch, I'm using the center point here, but you can see that's not the center of the bag. If it was the center of the bag, it'd be up a little bit more. But because of the handle, it ends up being a little further down. You can see it a little bit better here because you can see a full diamond here and you can see almost a full diamond here and then a smaller diamond down here. Okay, so again, you know, the quilting pattern is adjusted for the handle on this bag. So you need to think about that and think about your pattern piece and where you want the center point to be. Once you mark the center, you're going to be working off that center point as long as you are doing the pattern. So this is an example too of a quilting pattern that's done in 2 different passes. And what I mean by that is we're going to quilt the diamond pattern part first, and then we're going to come back and we're going to quilt the straight lines. So sometimes you're quilting multiple times on the same pattern piece to get an effect or a look that you like. So I have my pattern piece here, and I want the center of the bag to be 3 inches from the bottom, or the center of my pattern to be 3 inches from the bottom. So I'm actually going to mark a dot 3 inches from the bottom and centered. Okay. Then to get the 45-degree angle, I'm going to take the 45-degree angle of the ruler and stick it along the top. Now, in this classic pattern, this classic diamond pattern, these lines are 2 inches apart. Okay, so this is 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches. You can do it 1 inch. It'd just be a lot more stitching. You could do it 3 inches, or you could do it like I did the little Leah, where you do 1/2 inch, or you do something different, 1/2 inch and 2 inch, or whatever it may be. The choice is yours. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to line that 45-degree angle up right on the top of the bag, and I'm going to make sure that it's lined up perfectly. Then, since I want to do a 2-inch square, and this is the center, I'm going to go 1 inch away from the center. And I'm going to draw a 45-degree line. So I'm putting my 45-degree angle at the top, and I'm putting my 1 inch line, or my 1 inch mark here on the dot. Okay, I'm not putting it right on, I'm not putting the edge of the ruler on the dot. I'm putting the 1 inch line on the dot. And then I'm going to draw a line. Okay. Then from here, I'm going to put the 2-inch line on the line I just drew, and I'm going to draw another line. And because this is a 6-inch ruler, I can actually draw a line on both sides. Now, be careful. Sometimes quilting rulers are 2.5 inches or 4.5 inches. So if you do have a 1/2 inch rule, don't use it to mark this. I'm going to move it 2 inches, and I'm going to draw another line. Okay, so now I have my lines going in one direction. To get the lines going in the other direction, I'm now going to line up the 45-degree at the bottom of the bag. And again, I'm going to put my 1 inch, my center mark right on the 1 inch line. And then I'm going to draw a line. And I'm going to move the ruler over 2 inches. Draw another line, and one more time, 2 inch mark, and draw another line. Okay, so now I have this quilted pattern. So you're basically using the ruler as a guide to tell you where to do your lines. If you didn't want to do 45, if you wanted to do a 60-inch, obviously you'd line up the 60-inch line like I showed you on the little Leah, or if you want to do a 30-degree line, you could certainly do that as well. So once you have this done, you're going to go through and you're going to quilt this whole thing. So I'm going to bring this over. So now everything's quilted. I'm going to erase my lines and make sure everything looks good. But I still have this center point right here. And we're still working off this center point. So since this is the center of the bag, essentially, it's not the center of the pattern piece, but this is the center of the design. I now want to work from this design and go out and up. So I want to draw straight lines now at every point on this diamond. So I'm going to go 1/4 of an inch above and 1/4 of an inch below. Same thing here, 1/4 of an inch to the left, 1/4 of an inch to the right, and same with each one of these. So I'm just going to take my ruler. I'm going to put the 1/4 of an inch mark along each one of these 3 points. Okay, so I have a way to line it up straight. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and place it on there and then draw a line. And then I'm going to go 1/4 of an inch below that, or I could also measure 1/2 inch from the line I just drew. It's going to give me the same thing. And draw another line. So now around this point right here, which is the top of my center diamond, I have now drawn 2 lines that I will quilt on. I'm going to repeat the process at the bottom of this diamond. So 1/4 inch above and 1/4 inch below. And then I'm also going to repeat it on the right and on the left. So on the right and left, I'm lining up these 3 points of the diamond. And then on this side. Okay, from here, we do not have another point of a diamond vertically, because you can see this diamond is stitched off the bag and this diamond essentially is stitched off the bag. So we're not going to make any more horizontal lines because we don't have room to, but we do have room to make more vertical lines. So again, you're always working off this as your center. Okay, this is the point, and essentially that line right there is the center. So now I'm going to go over one more point, which is going to be right here. And right here, I'm going to draw 2 more vertical lines, 1/4 of an inch away from those points. And then I'm going to go to my machine and I'm going to quilt these straight lines. Okay. And once I do that, then I will get the Cannage pattern. Now, you could certainly, I think that Dior, instead of doing 2 inches, I think a lot of times they do 1 inch, because you can tell on their pattern or their Cannage, it seems like these center points are much smaller. So do what you want. If you'd rather do a 1 inch, you can certainly do a 1 inch. I mean, that's one of the, again, the best things. We sew because we get to create whatever we want. Okay. So Cannage world, good stuff. Okay, we are now going to move to the Thursday thread. And okay, I've been waiting for this one for a long time. We're going to talk all about Chanel, and she is just like my hero because she was a woman in a man's world. And she really, she went through some stuff. I mean, it was crazy. So if you remember last week, I showed you that Robin had gotten me this book on Chanel. And we're going to read you a quote from this. But before I do, I just want to remind you that she really made a big impact on the fashion and handbag industry. And all these other fashion houses that we've talked about, number one, were all started by men, although Fendi was a husband and wife. And usually their signature styles were developed over time. It was really generations. Where Chanel is different is she has actually been very consistent from the beginning, and it was all thanks to her. She had a hand in like everything. So thanks to Gabrielle Chanel, aka Coco Chanel, she really had a big impact on this. So let's talk a little bit about her legacy. She was a visionary, and let me, I have a quote here that I want to read you. Basically, she created the little black dress. She created Chanel No. 5 perfume. And then she also created the suit, and she created the bag, the 255 bag. So this quote says, and give me a second to find it here. It says here that Gabrielle Coco Chanel was a visionary and an entrepreneur whose passion and talent broke barriers, paving the way for many designers who followed in her footsteps. She designed the little black dress, Chanel No. 5 perfume, and her famous classic suit. And if those of you who are not familiar, a Chanel suit is a very straight lined suit that usually, I mean, it's very distinctive. If you ever saw it, you know it. And also the 255, a timeless handbag that revolutionized the world of fashion. And she really did revolutionize the world of fashion. She really was amazing. Okay, so we are going to look at Miss Chanel here. And it's really remarkable what she accomplished. She was born in France in 1883. And her family really struggled a lot when she was young. She lived with her parents and her 5 siblings in a tiny one-room house, and the children did not go to school. Her mother died when she was 12, and her father was unable to care for them. So he sent the boys off to do farm work, and he sent the girls off to an orphanage at Covenant. So she ended up, of course, later in life, she told stories about the Covenant and her upbringing because she really didn't want people to know she grew up poor and she was abandoned by her father. And she actually, a lot of times, claimed to be younger than she actually was, which, you know, we got to do what we got to do, right? The orphanage is where Chanel learned how to sew. She lived there until she was 18, and then she moved to a boarding house and found a job as a seamstress. At night, she sang in the cabaret, and this is where she adopted the nickname Coco. She really wanted to have her career as a performer. She had beauty and she had stage presence, but her singing voice was just kind of mediocre, so she really wasn't successful at that. During her lifetime, she was 23, and she met a young French ex-cavalry officer and textile heir named Mr. Balzan. And she became his living mistress. Rumor has it that she and Balzan had a son together, and who was later raised as her nephew, but that can't be confirmed. Through Balzan, she had access to a much different lifestyle than she was used to. She lived in a nice chateau. She wore the latest fashion. She went to lavish parties thrown by members of the French aristocrat. She began designing and embellishing straw boater hats, and people loved them so much that she began to sell them. So she really started out as a hat maker. So about 3 years into her relationship with Balzan, Chanel had an affair with his friend, Boy Capel, and he was a wealthy English polo player. They were together until he died in a car accident 9 years later. And you can see a photo here of Chanel and Capel. They weren't always monogamous. And in fact, Capel married another woman towards the end of their affair. And even still, Coco Chanel considered him basically he was the great love of her life. I mean, she loved him like crazy. He was it. So Boy Capel was a muse for Chanel, and his sophisticated fashion sense inspired a lot of her designs, including the iconic Chanel suit. Capel was also the one who funded her very first shop, Chanel Mode. So she opened Chanel Mode in 1910 after becoming a licensed milliner, which is basically a hat maker. And a lot of hats at that time were perched on the head, and they had a lot of embellishments, like you can see here in these photos. So Coco Chanel designed hats that fit the head really well, and she stuck to really lightweight embellishments like feathers. And so her hats were very fancy and very wearable. One of her customers was a famous theater actress who wore one of her hats in a play and modeled them in a photo shoot, which you can see here in these photos. This publicity gave Chanel's career a big boost, and she was able to open a clothing boutique full of her own designs. Coco Chanel's designs were quite minimalist. She created a lot of monochromatic looks with neutral colors, like simple patterns like these nautical stripes you see here. Her designs were also very androgynous, I can never say that word, compared to what was typical for the era. And around this time, women were beginning to wear trousers in the workplace, and Chanel was among the first to offer trousers as a fashion statement, not just as a practical garment. Because she was inspired by menswear and created boxy silhouettes, she truly changed the course of fashion for women. She has even been credited with freeing women from the tyranny of the corset. She was also very innovative with her use of textiles. For example, she used jersey to make a lot of her clothing because it was practical and affordable. We can see here in these examples that in these outfits. And until that point, this is jersey. And until that point, most jersey was used for men's undergarments, but she found ways to make it very chic and fashionable. I imagine that because it was a knit fabric, it was also much more comfortable than a lot of the women's clothing back then. By 1919, when Chanel was in her mid-30s, she was officially registered as a couturier and established by her Maison de Couture, which is a fashion house at 31 Rue Cambron. And this is one of Paris's most fashionable districts. In 1921, she introduced the iconic Chanel No. 5 perfume. And then a few years later, she introduced the little black dress. And let's face it, we still talk about the little black dress, right? Everybody needs a little black dress. That could really be transitions from day to evening, and it became an instant classic, and it appeared in Vogue magazine in 1926. In 1925, Chanel designed the interlocking CC logo, and there are a few different stories behind what inspired it. Some say it's linking her own initials, Coco Chanel, but others believe it's meant to symbolize the eternal connection with her late love, Boy Capel. Basically CC, Chanel, and Capel, which how romantic. So by the 1930s, Coco Chanel employed over 3,500 people and was basically the epicenter of the Paris social scene. However, that all changed when World War II broke out in 1939 and the House of Chanel had to temporarily close. This is where things got real juicy. And it was during the war, Chanel became involved in a relationship with a Nazi officer named Hans Gunther von Dinklage, and he was known as Spatz. This was obviously cause for a lot of scandal and speculation, and many people believe she actually started the relationship to save the life of her nephew or possibly her son. He was a French soldier, and he was captured by the Nazis, and Chanel used her connection to Spatz to get him released. Later during the war, she was also enlisted by a German officer to travel to Madrid and pass a message along to Winston Churchill. This was not authorized by the Nazis, and the officer and Chanel were essentially trying to go behind Hitler's back and negotiate an end to the war, but of course it didn't work. But all of this led to rumors that she was actually a spy for the Nazis. So this was never proven, but after the war, she was forced to move to Switzerland, where she stayed there for 8 years. So basically, her involvement in World War II with the German officer and the Nazis and trying to end the war basically got kicked out of France, and she had to live in Switzerland. So in 1954, at the age of 71, y'all, okay, now 71 years old, she finally got to move back to Paris, and she reopened her business. And then the following year, she released the 255 bag, which is undoubtedly one of the most recognized and influential bags ever created. Like we talked about earlier, it had that classic quilting diamond pattern, and it was also unique because it had a chain strap. So at that time, most of the women carried handbags, but Chanel wanted a bag that could be worn hands-free. The quilting and the longer strap completely changed the course of handbag history as we saw it, and it was inspired, or it has inspired, so many other bags throughout the years. You can see her here with her little attitude. I just love her. She's just so sweet. I'll tell you, she was a pistol ball. So Chanel led the business until her death in 1971. She was 87 years old, and she was ailing, but she literally worked until her final days. So according to her maid, her last words as she went to bed at night before her death were, "You see, this is how you die." She's just so matter of fact. So she was an icon. We're going to wrap up there for today with Chanel. There's still a lot to talk about, and we still have 50 years of history that we can talk about, but we're going to save that for a future episode. And we won't cover it next week because we have a really cool interview scheduled for next week, but we'll come back and the following week and learn about how the House of Chanel evolved after Coco Chanel's death. And let me just say, one of my favorite quotes from Chanel, she was quoted a lot, was, "Women dressed for women, because if women dressed for men, we'd all be walking around naked." I just think that's so classic. Oh, and the truth, right? All right, we are going to move on to Artistry Avenue, and Artistry Avenue is where we feature you, our artists. Each week, we share some photos that were posted in either the Simply Classic bag making community on Facebook or emailed to share@simplyclassic.net. All of our artists featured in Artistry Avenue will win a PDF Simply Classic pattern of your choice. This is open worldwide, and if we feature your bag, you have 30 days to email share@simplyclassic.net and let us know which pattern you would like. So since our theme this week is quilted bags, let's take a look at this first bag. All right. Now, we want to talk about Vicki Burcham for just a minute, because Vicki Burcham is who the Burcham is named after. And let me tell you, sometimes I have a story behind where I get the names for my bag, and this is a really classic one. So this bag was kind of it was cutting chart pattern, and it kind of had a strange name. We won't even go into that. But Vicki was pumping these things out, and she was posting them on the Facebook group. And I swear to God, every week she had like 5 more she'd post. And I was thinking, my gosh, Vicki, you are just a machine. Do you mind if I name this bag after you? Because you obviously love it. And wow, you just do a fabulous job. So she said, sure, I'd be honored. So the Burcham is because of Vicki Burcham. And anyway, she made this really beautiful bag. She actually used this kind of embroidery quilting design, and it was from Creative Kiwi, and it's called the Large Crazy Patch Block. And I mean, it's just gorgeous. Brown, black, classic, beautiful butterfly. I mean, she's just amazing. She does a fantastic job. Our next one is a Simply Classic clutch, and this looks like a kit that she bought from us. We have kits in red and pink and navy and black, and this is by Karen. And Karen really did a stunning job with this, and she did fabulous. Excellent job, Karen. And then Tiffany Tenace from Test Patch Studio made this Simply Classic clutch, and this is out of the navy. Now, Tiffany owns Test Patch Studio, which is a shop based in Washington State. And I recorded an interview with Tiffany this week that I'm excited to show you on next week's live stream. She's going to talk about her experience growing her business and kind of sharing her advice for anyone who wants to turn bag making into a career or side hustle or a second career or a third career, right? Wherever we're at in our lives. So we'll talk to Tiffany next week. So we are going to do a giveaway, and the giveaway this week is going to be, we're going to give away 2 PDF patterns. They're going to be Simply Classic Clutch patterns because we want you to try some quilting. And these are, again, PDF patterns, so it is open worldwide. So type the word quilted into the chat, and we'll have the computer pick 2 winners. And while we're letting the computer do its thing, we're going to address some questions. So Tammy asked me on YouTube, how do you sharpen your rotary hole punch? And this is a really great question. We're going to go to the overhead because I want to show you what I use. So this is a tool that I bought at a company called Made on Jupiter. Okay, and it's actually made for this. It is a rotary punch or a hole punch sharpener. And what you do, and I have my rotary punch right here, is you actually take it and you put it inside and you just kind of twist it. Okay, and it's going to sharpen. That one's unscrewed, but it's going to sharpen your blades for you. And these tools aren't super expensive. They're really very, very affordable. And every once in a while I'll go through, make sure all my little dots are punched out, and I'll just go through and I'll sharpen these. And of course, you don't have to just use them on a rotary. If you have single punches that you use with a mallet, you can also use this tool on that. This part of it here, the other part, is to sharpen the other side. Okay. Now mine won't reach down because I'm using a rotary punch, but if I had a regular hand punch, kind of like, let's just pretend this is a hand punch, this side here would fit right in like this, and you twist it, and then it would sharpen the outside, and then you put the point in to sharpen the inside of your point. Okay. All right, there's a link in the description below if you'd like to go ahead and take a look at that, because that really is a great little tool. Okay, so our next question comes from Colleen, and Colleen asked, do you know why my tech sew sometimes sews straight stitches on one side and a slanted stitch on the other side? I'm using a size 18 organ needle and a 3.5 stitch length and a 70 thread. So she actually sent a photo here, and I think we have the photo to show you. And you can see that on one side, like the left side, it looks pretty straight, and you can see the other side on the right, it looks like a slanted stitch. So I want to talk to you about needles, and now we're specifically talking about industrial machine needles. So here's a resource from Grothbeckert, and it is a little chart, and it shows you the tip of the needle. The reason why sometimes you get stitches maybe that you don't always want, maybe you have stitches that are slightly slanted, or maybe you want a slanted stitch and you're getting a straight stitch, is because of the tip of the needle. So looking at this here, you can see that every needle, every type of needle is shaped different. Now the SD is highlighted here in red because that's what I use. I like a really straight stitch, and so I use that SD needle. Okay. Leather needles are a little different from the typical sewing needles because they have a cutting point instead of a rounded point. And a lot of fabrics use that rounded point because essentially what they do is they push apart the fibers to get in between to sew, but that doesn't work with leather. The leather is a natural material. It's denser, obviously. It's not uniform. So instead, the needle actually punctures the leather to stitch it. Okay. So check out this resource in the link below. It is really a great guide to needles, and will probably give you a lot of information. I think if you go to our resource page on our website, you will see a resource where I buy my needles. It's called Diamond Needle Company, I believe is what it is, and that's where I buy all my needles. I buy them by like the 100 pack because obviously I go through them a lot. I sew a lot. Okay, Ether asks, if you use the double layer memory foam on a tote bag, would it add much weight overall? It is definitely a heavier, when you feel the two, you pick up the two, you can tell it's a little bit heavier, but it's not drastic, okay? It's such a lightweight foam that it doesn't add a lot of weight to the bag. If anything, it just adds thickness, like cushion. Another thing too, I tell you, is that with 2 layers of this memory foam, I had to use my industrial machine. I did not try that with my Burnett. I think that would have been a little bit too much for it. So Juanita asks, when quilting a bag, does the pattern piece shrink? That's a really good question, because I'm not a quilter, okay, but I do know that my mom's a quilter, and I do know that typically as you quilt, bags or quilts tend to shrink. So you always want to cut the pieces, say, larger. You start in the middle and you kind of stitch outward, right? What I noticed is that with 1 layer of foam, really didn't shrink. With 2 layers, it did shrink slightly, because as I was stitching, I could see it kind of coming in. However, this was such a small pattern piece that I didn't worry about cutting it out larger. I actually cut my pattern pieces. There's such a small amount of shrinkage that I cut my pattern pieces and then I quilt them, okay? Because I do want to keep the foam out of the seam allowance. That's really a great question. All right. So we are going to go ahead and see who won the Simply Classic Clutch patterns. So Rock Leatherworks won and Melanie Green won. So congratulations to both of you. Go ahead and email us at share@simplyclassic.net. If you could do that within the next 24 to 48 hours, we'd appreciate it. And we will go ahead and get you a PDF copy of the Simply Classic Clutch. All right. So we will be back next week. And next week, we are talking about hobby to business, essentially. And as I mentioned, we're going to be interviewing or show you an interview from Tiffany. I'm going to put my CPA hat on for a little bit and talk a little bit about the business aspect and what you basically need to do to go from hobby to small business. So we'll be back next week. It's February 20th at 7 p.m. And until next time, everybody, happy sewing.